What we do here is go back.
Everybody, hints and the thrill of the chase. Here we go. If you don't have the book, here it is. If you don't have the book, you should get it. I'm sure it's on eBay or Amazon or the bookstore in Santa Fe. You could probably still order it from there. My book's pretty well worn, I'll tell you that. So what did Forrest say about the book? He said, first, read it as his memoir. Read it as his memoir. Then he said, go through and read the poem 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Then go back to the book and read it slowly, looking for things that stand out that help you with the clues in the poem. So that's what we're going to do. So the first question is, where do we start? If anybody who has the book, if you've noticed, the book does not have chapters listed. Each chapter has a heading, but there is no index that lists all the chapters. Why that is, I don't know. As far as the hints, where do we start? Well, how about the chapter that talks about the treasure hunt? Gold and more. Picture the treasure chest, a lot of gold coins. I see gold nuggets. I see a key. The treasure chest is not locked. That's one thing Forrest did tell us, but I think the key is inside the treasure chest, so you can lock it if you want. There is a keyhole. There is a clasp. So, interesting. I wonder what that figure is. This figure in the treasure chest, I'm not sure what that is. Is that a cow? Cowlazars? Get it? No? Okay, let's move on. More gold coins. He knew exactly where to hide the chest, so it'd be difficult to find, but not impossible. It's in the mountains somewhere north of Santa Fe. So when he was almost 80, he figured it was time to act. He wrote a poem containing 9 clues that, if followed precisely, will lead to the end of my rainbow and the treasure. Here's the poem. Here's an old style, looks to be an old map with a figurine of a frog, coin, gold nuggets. Something I find interesting is right after the poem, it says there are other subtle clues sprinkled in the story. Again, what are we looking for? We're looking for hints to the clues in the poem. Where do we begin it in the poem? We begin it where warm waters halt. In order to figure out where warm waters halt, we have to know what the warm waters are. So somewhere in this book, there is a hint, in my opinion, to what warm waters are. And I find it very interesting that in the sentence after the poem, he says there are other subtle clues sprinkled in the stories. Sprinkled. Water sprinkles when it rains, right? That's the sentence after the poem. The sentence before the poem says, he wrote a poem containing 9 clues that, if followed precisely, will lead to the end of my rainbow and the treasure. Rainbow. Rain again. We're trying to figure out warm waters. We have a reference to water in the sentence before the poem and the sentence after the poem. Sprinkled and rainbow. Coincidence? I don't think so. I think what he's telling us is that since the clues are sprinkled in the stories, they're actually hints, we need to look through this book to where he references water. We're trying to figure out what the warm waters are. We're trying to figure out hints as to where the warm waters halt, right? If the clues are sprinkled in the stories, I think he's using the word sprinkled. It has a double meaning. So let's try the theory out. Is there anywhere in this book where he mentions water? I'm talking about weird things. Remember, he said things that stick out. So let's take a look in the book and see if we can find instances where he's made a reference to water And it just looks a little odd for some reason. If you have the book in a searchable form, like I do, it's kind of easy. You can search words. And if you want to be a serious hunter on this thing, you probably need it in a searchable form, right? Type it out if you have to. So what I did is I looked for the word water. We're going to be at the end of his rainbow. The clues are sprinkled. We're finding where warm waters halt. Let's look up the word water, see what we find. So after looking for the word water, it's in the book 36 times, including the 2 times that it's in the poem. So it doesn't seem like something that sticks out, right? So I thought, well, what would have to do with rainbow, sprinkled? Rain, right? You need rain normally for a rainbow. And if it's sprinkling, it's raining. So I look for the word rain. The word rain is in the book exactly once. The word raining is in the book twice. Let's look at those. This chapter is called Important Literature. Here's a picture of Forrest signing books at the Turquoise Mine. Important Literature. And it talks about education and how he wishes he would have gotten some more. But the word raining is right here. So one day when it was raining, I went to Borders to see about those books. Basically, Forrest went to Borders bookstore to find books by Hemingway and Fitzgerald, 2 very well-known authors. But didn't it stick out a little bit that he says, so one day when it was raining, I went to Borders to see about those books. It's kind of strange that he threw it in there. So he asked about how he asked where the books were. He found them on the bookshelf. And then he paid for them and he went home. And then the interesting thing is he goes back to Borders bookstores. And when he does, it says at Borders the next day it was still raining. So I just wandered around the store. Twice he mentions raining with Borders bookstores. Just seems kind of odd. So if we go with the theory that rainbow and sprinkling have something to do with water, and twice he mentions that it was raining when he went to Borders, and he never says Borders bookstore. He just says at Borders the next day it was still raining. Let's see the first time he mentions it. So one day when it was raining, I went to Borders to see about those books. It seems to me that he might be pointing out that Borders is something we need to pay attention to. You know, the whole chapter, Important Literature, is pretty interesting when he describes the 2 times that he went to Borders, both times when it was raining, which is why I think we should really pay attention to the chapter. When he's in line to check out, once he finds his book, which is For Whom the Bell Tolls and The Great Gatsby, are the 2 books that he picks up. When he's in line, he's got a sentence here that says, you could almost guess how slow the dumb line was moving. The only register in the place was showing more patience than I felt at the moment, while 2 borderline biddies were preoccupied with some kind of breathtaking nonsense at the expense of my time and patience. Borderline biddies. There's the word border again. And biddies, I guess, is a term just for old women. But it's interesting that there's a chapter in the book that's called, let's see if I can find it here so I don't get it wrong, No Place for Biddies. And there's a picture of 2 women. We'll get to that chapter in a minute. So he's in line, he's checking out from Borders. 2 borderline biddies were preoccupied with some kind of breathtaking nonsense at the expense of my time and patience. What do we need if we're going to look for the chest? Time and patience. Breathtaking nonsense. Marvel gaze? Maybe. It's kind of a stretch. But he's putting little things in here that make my antenna perk up here. This is the chapter, No Place for Biddies. You see we've got a picture of 2 ladies, which are presumably the biddies. And this whole chapter is only 2 pages long. At the end here, we've got a picture of Forrest and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. He's got his back to them with his hand in his pocket. And it's a very strange chapter to put in here. It's 2 old biddies, 2 old ladies, who basically are making fun of him. He's only 8 years old. They say he'd run away from home, but he's not allowed to cross the street. It says they make fun of him. They lived down the block and they made fun of him. They thought they were better than him because they lived in a brick house. The whole chapter is kind of odd. But he does mention his mother, and that's something else I want to bring up. Is whenever he mentions his mother through the book, it almost seems like we should pay attention. But just to be safe, my mother always told me to wear clean underwear in case there was an accident. She was smart like that, and usually I did what she said because I loved her so much. She was a perfect example of nature's long-sightedness, and everyone around our block knew it. So that's something else we'll go through, is whenever he mentions his mother, it seems interesting. But to get back and to stay with the water theme, it seems Borderline Biddies, he went to Borders twice when it was raining. The Borderline Biddies were inside Borders bookstore. There's one other place where he mentions rain. So this instance of rain takes us back to the Golden Moor chapter, the chapter where he actually hid the treasure. He talks about collections, that he used to collect bottle caps, and that he collected string. He used to tie one piece to the end of the other and just roll it into a ball. Then one afternoon, and he says he'd tie at least three strings a day, and after a year or so, the ball was so large it couldn't get through his bedroom door. A ball of string, so large it couldn't get through his bedroom door. Then one afternoon, when I walked home from school in the rain, my string had disappeared. It just wasn't there anymore. I tried to explain to my mother that since the ball couldn't get out of my room, it was somewhat difficult for anyone to steal it. She didn't answer, but just kept nodding and looking out the window. I think she was waiting for the postman or something. Even to this day, the mystery of what happened to my string ball remains one of the great unsolved crimes in my family. So his mother, he mentions the rain, which brings our attention to this chapter. The ball of string has just disappeared. When he questions his mother about it, she just kept nodding and looking out the window. I think she was watching for the postman or something. What's interesting is if you don't own the book, there are postmarks throughout the book. Let me show you an example. The Golden Moor chapter, picture of the chest, there's a postmark somewhere north of Santa Fe. And we see Friday, it looks like 5 July. I'm not sure what the picture is here at the bottom. His mother was looking out the window. It looked like she was waiting for the postman. That could be a reference to these postmarks, and we can make a video on those. But when I hear postman, what I think of is zip code. Could it be possible that there's a zip code in this book somewhere, or hidden somehow? I mean, wouldn't that narrow down the search area if we had a zip code that's within the Rocky Mountains to work off of? And doesn't mean the chest is buried there, but maybe within that zip code is where warm waters halt. It's a theory. There's a lot of these postmarks. 36 maybe? I'm not sure. I'd have to go through. I've got the list in my notes somewhere. But again, there's a lot of things we can get into. And I don't want to go wandering off into some crazy tangent. So it seems to me Borders could be one of the clues. And let's think about that. If we're talking about borders, there's definitely borders in our search area, right? Each state has a border. Once we got the map from Too Far to Walk, the highlighted region, that's another border that's on this particular map. But if we look at the map, can we find anything out from borders? Let's take a look. If we look at this map and we go along the borders, is there anything that stands out? Yellowstone is right in the border. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? It's right in the corner of Wyoming. You could say it's next to the border. Now, we would have to have a detailed map to find out, does Yellowstone go into Montana? Is the border between the two states within Yellowstone National Park? If it is, I think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, we've got borders that run all through our search area. If we look up here, if we start at the top, which is probably where I should have started, and we look at the border to Canada, well, look what we have. Glacier National Park. Could where warm waters halt be Glacier National Park? Yeah, if it's a play on words, there's no warm waters in Glacier National Park just because it's called Glacier National Park. Here we have a city called Browning, home of Brown. It's just something to think about. The other border I want to bring our attention to is the border between Colorado in New Mexico. Is that border where warm waters halt? Well, it could be. If you look at the fishing regulations for New Mexico, it designates warm waters where you can go fly fishing. And those warm waters, let's see, we've got the Rio Grande that goes across the border. We've got another river right here. And that, where the border is where the warm waters halt. Because I don't believe Colorado designates those same rivers and streams as warm. I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. The other thing that's interesting, although it's kind of out of our search area, is the four borders. You know that monument where the four borders come together? The four states come together, four corners? But it doesn't really look highlighted on the map. But that's another one, another interesting case for borders. Right after the No Place for Biddies chapter, there's a chapter called Jumpstarting the Learning Curve. And it's about him going to junior high school. And I look through it and I try and find those water references, raining, rain. I didn't find any, but I did find one thing that jumped out at me. And remember, Forrest said things that jump out at you. Aberrations, there's things that catch up in your brain that live out on the edge. I'm paraphrasing what he said there. And that is this right here in the chapter Jumpstarting the Learning Curve. So basically his father is the principal of the school where Forrest attended. And he got in trouble. His teacher sent him to the principal's office. So he's sitting there and his father says, "Okay, son, what have we learned from all of this?" And Forrest says, "Well, I didn't have a clue about what we learned, but was praying thanks to Thor because he was holding my hand and smiling." Thanks to Thor. Does that jump out at anybody? It was a little odd. I was praying thanks to Thor. Thanks to God. Thanks to maybe the Virgin Mary or one of the saints. But thanks to Thor because he was holding my hand and smiling. But I try and tie that into the water theme. And I thought, well, there's nothing there. Now, if he was crying, right? If it said he was crying, there were tears running down his face, maybe then we could say, okay, it's tied into water. But it's not. It just says he was praying thanks to Thor. But then I looked up who Thor was. In Norse mythology, Thor is the god of thunder, lightning, and storms. Among other things, rain. Again, there's our clue or placeholder for clues or hints. Placeholder for hints. Thor, the god of storms and rain. Same chapter, Jumpstarting the Learning Curve, a little bit later on. He's talking about sitting in school. It was easy to justify the time I spent in Spanish class looking out of the big window that was adjacent to my desk. It was on the second floor, and a beautiful old iron slide-down fire escape was just outside that window. When the sun was out, the smell of freedom was more than I could resist. Miss Ford was writing Spanish words on the blackboard. I'd quickly slip through the window and down and away. Fortunately, I was the only one in class who knew that trick. The sliding, I mean. And even though that rusty old iron thing marked the trail of my britches pretty good with a heavy brown color, it was worth it. To Miss Ford, out the window meant out of sight, where I couldn't cause her any more trouble. She was going to flunk me anyway. So what difference did it make? I was beginning to learn where the edges were. Again, what are edges but a border? Another reference to border. There's got to be a methodology. He said that the hints aren't deliberately placed to aid the seeker. And that just means he doesn't have a chapter that says, hey, these are the hints. You've got to find them. You've got to really read this and study it and try and find them, which is what I'm trying to do. So, what do you think of this theory on water? End of his rainbow. Clues are sprinkled. It was raining twice when he went to Borders. Thanks Thor, the god of storms and lightning. It had to soak in on his father. And east of Mississippi. And what does all that lead to at the end of the chapter? That he was beginning to see where the edges were. The hint, ladies and gentlemen, is borders. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. All you have to do is hit the red button that's right down here. And what that'll do is send you a notification when I put up a new video. Right now there's 165 subscribers, and when I upload this video, they're all going to be notified. And I'm going to wait a couple days before I post it. So the people who are subscribed will know the second the video is uploaded. Everybody else is going to have to wait until I decide to share it. Leave in the comments what you think. I know you will. I'm sure people will probably rip the idea apart. But leave it in the comments below what you think of borders being a hint. And let's get out the maps. Let's look in our search area. How does borders help us? Is where warm waters halt at a border? I think it could be. The New Mexico-Colorado border, it's interesting that warm waters are designated in New Mexico, and he's a fly fisherman, and at the border is where those warm waters stop. Now we would have to find where along the border, specifically where they stop, and then look for the canyon down. But I got a feeling people are going to be doing that over the next couple days. So like the video, subscribe, share it, and I'll talk to you next time.